When you think of Leeds United, you probably don't think much about them. However, behind the scenes is something nobody even realises. This is team 3 of explaining the entire history of the Premier League. We're doing this with every single team, so if you want to see yours, make sure to subscribe. We have to go back to 1919, where a different team, Leeds City, got into trouble for making illegal payments to players. As a result, they were disbanded as a whole. However, the city of Leeds still wanted to have a football team, thus creating Leeds United and buying Ellen Road for just £250. They joined the second division of the Football League in 1920, where they initially struggled until finishing second in 1924, going up to the first division. The early years consisted of a lot of back and forth for Leeds. They managed to secure a consistent few seasons in the 30s, but they never posed a serious threat to any big teams. After World War II, they were hit heavily. The loss of players, damage to the stadium and a limited budget caused Leeds United to completely collapse. They finished in the lower half of the second division and struggled to recover for a few years, taking nearly 10 years before they could return to the top division in 1955. This was mainly thanks to their star man, John Charles, who was clinical in their campaign. Charles continued to lead the team forward as they would go on to finish the top half of the table. He was hungry to obtain success at the highest level. However, after being sold to Juventus for a record-breaking £65,000 in 1957, Leeds struggled and had a sharp decline that would see them go down in 1960. A mix of poor form, financial problems and weak recruitments saw Leeds plummet. They hit their lowest point ever and needed someone to turn it around. And that someone came by the name of Don Revie. Now, Revie was just a standard player at Leeds who at the age of 33 became the manager of his own club. Little did anyone know that this would be the beginning of one of the greatest runs football has ever seen. The Don Revie era. He inherited a struggling team that had just narrowly avoided relegation to the third division. He instantly brought a strict style of management, a strict code of conduct for the players, a new youth programme for younger talents, and switching the club colours from yellow and blue to white to match Real Madrid. Revie meant no nonsense when it came to his management. He didn't want to just turn Leeds into a competitive team, he wanted to turn them into one of the best teams in the world. People didn't believe him at first, but after gaining promotion to the first division in 1964, momentum began to build. Their intense and disciplined style of play shocked the footballing world as they finished second in their first season back, losing the title on goal difference, as well as finishing runners-up to the FA Cup. This sudden spike wasn't just a purple patch. They came runners-up to the leagues and cups multiple times before finally in 1969 they broke through and won their first division title. Their dominant run continued through the early 70s. They won the Intercities Fair Cup twice, reached the European semi-finals in 1970 before controversially losing to Celtic, and finished runners-up in 1973. They reached multiple FA Cup finals, winning it once, and to top it off, won the league title for a second time in 1974 after going 29 games unbeaten. This turned out to be the last triumph for Don Revie as he left for the England national team that summer, putting an end to the Don Revie era. The question now stood, who was going to replace him? They called upon Brian Clough to be the big replacement, which was seen as an odd decision, and that was quickly proven as it was a complete disaster. He didn't respect Don Revie and used the complete opposite style as him. The players quickly opposed him and after just 44 days, he was sacked, marking him as one of the most disastrous managers ever. Next came Jimmy Armfield, who managed to restore some order and make the most of his aged squad. He even managed to bring this team to a European Cup final, beating the likes of Barcelona. However, it ended in a controversial 2-0 loss to Bayern Munich. The Leeds fans were furious and began rioting after the final. UEFA resultantly banned them from Europe for 4 years. Despite the shock final, problems still arose. The Revie era players were aging, replacements failed to match the quality, and managers came and went. They went through 4 managers between 78 and 82. Poor recruitment and outdated tactics led to bigger clubs overtaking them, and in 1982, Leeds United were relegated from the first division. This wasn't the end of it as they struggled in the second division. The club failed to modernise their tactics. Poor financial decisions led to increased debts as crowd violence became a bigger problem. The club was in crisis. They needed stability, so they appointed Howard Wilkinson, who instantly brought a disciplined and modern structure. He had clear goals of recruiting experienced players as well as investing in the youth. A mix of both began to work as they won their second division in 1990, and then, just 2 years later, they won their first division title. They had done the unthinkable. Within just a couple of years, Wilkinson had reignited Leeds into a fired up team to be feared upon. However, what was to happen next was something that nobody expected. After the English League rebranded to the Premier League, Leeds struggled to adapt. They didn't win a single away game and scraped survival late into the season. They briefly recovered but couldn't surpass mid-table for the next few years, and after a poor set of results in 1997, Wilkinson was sacked as Leeds United manager. George Green was picked up as his successor, and to be fair to him, he did bring stability to the club, finishing 5th in his first and only full season as he would go to move to Spurs that summer. They brought in David O'Leary, which began a brand new era for Leeds. He brought a bold footballing strategy. With rising talents like Harry Kewell and Rio Ferdinand, O'Leary was ready to achieve great things. They retained consistent top 5 finishes in the Prem despite not winning it. However, all focus was in Europe. Leeds managed to reach the semi-finals of both the UEFA Cup and the Champions League. However, that chance at European glory still wasn't quite there yet. They were praised for their attacking threat across Europe and was considered one of the strongest sides. Little did anyone know that all of this would crumble down as something was going in the background that would ruin Leeds United forever. Under chairman Peter Ridsdale, Leeds had taken out large loans to spend on big name players, gambling with the hopes of Champions League football. However, when they failed to qualify for Champions League, the club were left with loads of debts. The problem escalated as David O'Leary was controversially sacked after failing to bring any trophies. His replacements couldn't replicate what he did, and in 2004, Leeds were relegated from the Premier League, just 2 years after being a Champions League semi-finalist. It didn't improve. Debts were bigger, Ellen Road had to be sold for revenue, managers were being sacked, there were limited investments, and in 2007, they cracked. Leeds United went into administration and were relegated to League One for the first time ever. It was a long road back to the Premier Leagues. They had to completely change their structure and go again. It wasn't going to be easy, but after returning to the Championship in 2010, there was a brief sense of hope, but that was until a man called Kevin Bates bought Leeds United. High ticket prices and limited squad investments angered the fans as the team suffered. Between 2012 and 2017, the club went through 5 different managers, and none of them made a difference. Ownership changed in 2014, but it was nearly worse. Constant manager changes, legal trouble, and false promises. Leeds looked lost. Their identity couldn't be seen. However, after Andrea Radrizzani bought the club in 2017, the club finally had hope. He bought back Ellen Road and modernised the club completely with just one goal in sight: to return to the Premier League. In 2019, Leeds shocked the world by hiring Marcelo Bielsa, who transformed Leeds overnight. His high-pressing style of play proved effective, and after a playoff heartbreak in 2019, they finally did it. Leeds United lifted the Champions League, finishing on 93 points, making their way into the Premier League for the first time in 16 years. History had been made, and it got even better as they finished their first season within the top half of the table. This historic result didn't last long, however, as after a poor set of results the next season, Bielsa was controversially sacked as Leeds manager. They managed to scrape survival on the final day to stay up. However, after Rafinha's departure, they couldn't keep up with the competition and were relegated at the end of the 22-23 season. There was a new hope as the 49ers took over as Leeds owners, and after Leeds earned their place back in the Premier League, will they survive this season? After you've done that, why not click this video right here.